March 10th, 1943. 0400 hours. In the cold black water of the North Atlantic, 200 feet beneath the surface, Captain Lieutenant Klaus Hartmann sat in the control room of U-308, listening to his radio operator decode the latest message from U-boat headquarters. The signal gave him the exact coordinates of convoy HX-22820 merchantmen moving northeast toward Britain, escorted by only 4 destroyers. Hartmann smiled. This was why Germany was winning the Battle of the Atlantic. But 700 miles away, in a nondescript building at Bletchley Park in England, a young British cryptanalyst named Joan Clark was reading the exact same message. She had decoded it 3 hours before Hartmann received it, and she was already directing Royal Navy destroyers to intercept. What neither Hartmann nor his commander Admiral Dönitz knew was that for the past 3 months, every single U-boat transmission had been read by the British. Every position report, every attack plan, every movement order. The Germans believed their Enigma cipher was mathematically unbreakable. They were catastrophically wrong. And that single breakthrough, the cracking of the four-rotor naval Enigma code called Shark, would doom 41 U-boats in the next 60 days and force Germany to abandon its stranglehold on the Atlantic forever. This is the story of how one signal changed everything. The German Navy had been using Enigma cipher machines since 1926. The machine looked like a typewriter mounted in a wooden box, but it was far more sophisticated. When an operator pressed a key, electrical current passed through a series of rotating cylinders called rotors, scrambling the letter into something completely different. The receiving U-boat, with rotors set to the same starting position, could reverse the process and read the original message. With 3 rotors and a plug board that further scrambled the letters, the Enigma created 158 quintillion possible combinations. 158 quintillion. German naval cryptographers believed this made their communications absolutely secure. No human could possibly test every combination. No code-breaking team on Earth had the resources. They were so confident that Admiral Dönitz transmitted everything by radio U-boat positions, patrol zones, convoy intercept coordinates, fuel status, torpedo counts. He organized his submarines into wolf packs, groups of 8 to 15 boats that would converge on a single convoy and overwhelm its escorts. The tactic required constant radio communication. Dönitz would receive reports from reconnaissance aircraft or patrol boats, calculate where a convoy would be in 12 hours, then broadcast orders to every U-boat in the area proceed to this exact position at this exact time. And because he believed Enigma was unbreakable, he never worried about the British listening. The British were listening. They had been since 1941, when the Royal Navy captured U-110 intact, along with its Enigma machine and codebooks. That breakthrough allowed Bletchley Park to read German naval communications for months. Convoys were rerouted around Wolfpack positions. U-boats found empty ocean where they expected fat merchantmen. German losses climbed. But on February 1st, 1942, everything changed. The Kriegsmarine introduced the M4 Enigma, a new machine with 4 rotors instead of 3. Overnight, Bletchley Park went blind. The code the British called Shark replaced the 3-rotor system, and suddenly the cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park were staring at gibberish they couldn't decode. The Germans called the next 10 months the second happy time. U-boats operating blind were dangerous. U-boats with perfect intelligence about convoy routes were devastating. In February 1942 alone, German submarines sank 85 Allied ships. In March, 95 ships went down. The mathematics were brutal. Britain imported 50 million tons of supplies annually. 70% came by sea. If the Germans could sink ships faster than the Allies could build them, Britain would starve. And in early 1942, that's exactly what was happening. Winston Churchill would later write that the U-boat peril was the only thing that ever truly frightened him. He understood what was at stake. If the Atlantic lifeline was cut, Britain would have to negotiate surrender. Everything depended on breaking Shark. The breakthrough came on October 30th, 1942, off the coast of Egypt. The British destroyer HMS Petard depth-charged U-559 to the surface. As the damaged submarine wallowed in the Mediterranean swell, 3 British sailors, Lieutenant Tony Fasson, able seaman Colin Grazier, and 16-year-old canteen assistant Tommy Brown, swam to the sinking U-boat and climbed inside. They knew what they were looking for: Enigma machines, codebooks, any scrap of paper that might help Bletchley Park crack shark. In the cramped, flooding control room, Fasson and Grazier grabbed everything they could find: a short signal book, a weather code book, setting sheets. They passed the documents up through the conning tower to Brown, who swam them back to the petard. Then U-559's bow lifted. Water poured into the control room in a roaring torrent. Brown screamed for Fasson and Grazier to get out. They didn't make it. Both men went down with the submarine. But the documents they died retrieving reached Bletchley Park within days. And on December 13th, 1942, 10 months after going blind, Bletchley Park cracked shark. At first, decryption took days. A four-rotor Enigma message might be decoded 72 hours after transmission, too late to be tactically useful. But Bletchley Park was getting faster. By March 1943, they were reading shark messages within 12 hours. By summer, within 6 hours. And by fall, they were breaking German naval codes faster than German radio operators could type them. The implications were staggering. Admiral Dönitz, sitting in his headquarters in Paris, would calculate where a convoy was heading and radio-precise coordinates to his wolf packs. The signal would be intercepted by British listening stations scattered across England and Scotland. Within hours, cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park would decode it. The intelligence, codenamed Ultra, would be transmitted to the Admiralty in London, and convoy escort commanders would receive new routing orders: turn 20 degrees south, maintain radio silence, increase speed to 14 knots. The convoy would slip past the waiting U-boats like a ghost. Meanwhile, Dönitz would wait for attack reports that never came. His submarines would patrol empty ocean, burning precious fuel, finding nothing. And he had no idea why. The first hint came in March 1943. Dönitz had positioned 40 U-boats in a massive patrol line across the North Atlantic convoy routes. 40 submarines, 300 miles wide, waiting to intercept the steady stream of merchant ships carrying American supplies to Britain. He was certain at least one convoy would blunder into his trap. Instead, convoy after convoy slipped through gaps in the line that shouldn't have existed. Ships passed within 10 miles of waiting U-boats and were never spotted. When U-boats did make contact, British escorts appeared with uncanny speed, forcing the submarines deep before they could attack. Dönitz began to suspect something was wrong. But what the Enigma machine was mathematically unbreakable. His cryptographers assured him of this repeatedly. Perhaps the British had developed new radar that could detect submarines at longer ranges. Perhaps they had new direction-finding equipment that could locate U-boats by their radio transmissions. He never considered the truth that every word he transmitted was being read in real time by the enemy. Then came May 1943, the month U-boat crews would forever call Black May. It started with convoy ONS-5 on May 1st. Dönitz had gathered 30 U-boats to attack the slow-moving merchant ships. The Wolfpack should have massacred the convoy. Instead, the battle lasted 4 days and ended with 13 merchant ships sunk, but 6 U-boats destroyed. For the first time in the war, U-boat losses exceeded merchant losses in a single battle. Dönitz was shaken, but he pushed forward. May 4th convoy HX-237. 7 merchant ships sunk, 7 U-boats lost. May 6th convoy SC-129. 3 merchants, 4 U-boats. The pattern was impossible to ignore, but the worst was yet to come. On May 15th, convoy SC-130 steamed through an area where Dönitz had positioned 5 U-boats in perfect ambush formation. Not a single merchant ship was lost. All 5 U-boats were sunk. Among the dead was Peter Dönitz, the Admiral's 21-year-old son, serving aboard U-954. His boat was destroyed by a British frigate that appeared exactly where German intelligence said no escorts should be. The Wolfpack tactics that had brought Britain to the edge of starvation were suddenly, inexplicably failing. By May 20th, Dönitz had lost 34 submarines, 34 boats in 20 days, 1.5 U-boats per day. The casualty rate was unsustainable. Each submarine carried a crew of between 40 and 50 men. Each crew took months to train. Each boat took 8 months to build. Germany was losing submarines faster than its shipyards could replace them, and losing experienced crews that couldn't be replaced at all. On May 24, 1943, at his headquarters in Paris, Admiral Dönitz made the hardest decision of his career. He recalled all U-boats from the North Atlantic. The signal went out at 1400 hours. All submarines withdraw to safe zones south of the Azores. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous military campaign of World War II, had just turned decisively in favor of the Allies. For the first time since September 1939, U-boats were not hunting convoys in the North Atlantic, and Dönitz still didn't know why he'd lost. In his war diary, he wrote that British radar and direction-finding equipment had become too sophisticated. He suspected betrayal, worried about spies in his headquarters. He ordered investigations into whether the British had captured U-boats with intact Enigma machines. But he never seriously considered that Enigma itself had been broken. Even years after the war, when British historians began revealing the ultra-secret, German naval officers refused to believe it. Wilhelm Trano, one of Germany's leading cryptanalysts, insisted until his death that four-rotor Enigma was mathematically unbreakable. The shock, when absolute proof emerged in 1974, devastated the survivors of the U-boat war. They finally understood. Every patrol, every attack, every movement order, all of it read by the enemy. Their commanders hadn't failed them. Their courage hadn't wavered. Their machines hadn't malfunctioned. They had fought with absolute bravery, and they had lost, because the British were reading their mail. Of 40,000 men who served in German U-boats during World War II, 30,000 never came home. 75% casualties, the highest loss rate of any German military branch. Many of those men died because their admiral, convinced his codes were secure, transmitted their exact positions to headquarters. And the British, reading those transmissions in real time, sent destroyers and aircraft to hunt them down. The strategic consequences were immeasurable. Without U-boats threatening the Atlantic convoy routes, America could ship unlimited men and material to Britain. The invasion of North Africa in November 1942 succeeded partly because supply ships crossed the Atlantic unmolested. The invasion of Sicily in July 1943, the invasion of Italy in September, and finally D-Day on June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history, requiring thousands of ships crossing the English Channel repeatedly for weeks. None of it would have been possible if German U-boats still controlled the Atlantic. The breaking of Shark didn't just win the Battle of the Atlantic, it made winning the war possible. And it all came down to 3 British sailors who climbed into a sinking submarine off the coast of Egypt on October 30th, 1942. 2 of them drowned retrieving the codebooks that would eventually break Shark. They never knew what they accomplished. Lieutenant Tony Fasten and able seaman Colin Grazier died thinking they'd grabbed some papers that might help the cryptographers back home. They had no idea those papers would lead to cracking the most sophisticated cipher machine ever built. They had no idea their sacrifice would doom the U-boat force. They had no idea they'd helped win the war. Admiral Dönitz withdrew his U-boats from the North Atlantic on May 24, 1943. They would return months later with new tactics, new technology, experimental submarines that could stay underwater for weeks. But they never regained their dominance. The wolf packs never again brought Britain to the edge of starvation. The Atlantic lifeline remained open, and Germany, cut off from resources, surrounded by enemies, slowly ground toward inevitable defeat. One signal changed German U-boat strategy forever, but it wasn't a signal the Germans sent. It was the signal Bletchley Park sent on December 13, 1942, informing the Admiralty we can read Shark. After that, every German transmission became a weapon aimed at German submarines. Every coordinate Dönitz broadcast guided British hunters to their prey. Every Wolfpack assembly point became a killing ground. If you found this story as gripping as we did, hit that like button and subscribe to Orders of History. We're uncovering these buried moments of military history every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The story of how three men broke the unbreakable code is one of the most crucial intelligence victories in military history. And it's a reminder that wars aren't won just on battlefields. Sometimes they're won in flooded submarine control rooms. Sometimes they're won by mathematicians hunched over cipher machines in English countryside estates. Sometimes they're won by the courage of men who climb into sinking ships to grab papers they don't understand, because someone told them those papers might matter. Fasson and Grazier couldn't have known their sacrifice would lead to Black May. They couldn't have known it would doom 41 U-boats in 60 days. They couldn't have known it would open the Atlantic to Allied shipping and make D-Day possible. They just knew the job needed doing. So they did it, and the course of the war changed forever. Did you know that German U-boat crews didn't learn their codes had been broken until nearly 30 years after the war ended? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who appreciates real history. These moments deserve to be remembered.